yeah, we're probably gonna take the full time, the full 2 hours today, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just, you'll just have to announce it so that we can let the record show that you're leaving, so, yeah. You just, coordinate with Katie, just let her, did you let Katie know that you're, yeah, let Katie know, and then when you can come to me, just speak up and say it's out.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Environmental Commission meeting for March. We'll get going, and we'll start out with the roll call.
Commission Chair Kramer,
Present?
Commission Vice Chair O'Connor,
Here.
Commissioner Parker,
Here.
Commissioner Switzler,
Here.
Commissioner Bruner,
Here.
and Commissioner Fletcher.
Here.
Let the record show that we have a quorum with 6 commissioners present and Commissioner Wigg absent.
Thanks, Maria. Okay, and would anyone like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
I will.
Thanks.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance.
Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay, and next we'll move on to oral communications.
No oral communications.
Did we not have the oral communications, the pink slip, I think?
That's to speak on an agenda item. The white slips are for oral communications. Would you like?
I think that was intended for a white slip. Yeah,
Okay, that's
sorry
fine.
about that.
Okay, we have one speaker, Jennifer Jaquette, in support of item 8A.
Thank you so much for the honor and privilege to speak to you all this evening, and thank you to the City of Encinitas generally for drafting a climate action plan. I have been coming to Encinitas since 2011, since I first taught at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And this year I have the great fortune of living here, and my daughter is in 2nd grade at Cardiff Elementary. Although I live here, I'm a professor of environmental science and policy at the Rosenstiel School of Marine, Atmospheric, and Earth Science at the University of Miami in Florida. My lab focuses on food and environmental policy. And we read all the latest science on the environmental impacts of food production, and that's the area in which I also research and publish. So all food has environmental impacts, we know that. But animal-based foods have higher environmental impacts relative to other foods, and that's because animal agriculture has to be fed itself. So you have those additional crops that are being grown, lands that are being cleared to grow crops to feed to animals. Animal agriculture accounts for an estimated 20% of human-caused global warming, and beef and dairy products are particularly intense in terms of greenhouse gas emissions because cows emit methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas and more potent than carbon dioxide. Some people believe that this is the methane decade, and that by curbing methane emissions this decade, it's our best hope at limiting some of the most dangerous effects of climate change. Animal ag is also a big driver of biodiversity and habitat loss, as well as freshwater use. And since moving here, I never heard this in Florida, but since moving to California, I've heard a lot of people here say they switched from almond milk to cow's milk because almond milk uses less water. And that is unfortunately simply not true. Cow's milk uses significantly more water for it to be produced, 3 times as much as almond milk. And that's in part because of all that alfalfa that we grow, especially in the state of California, to feed to cows. And I want to highlight here that that misunderstanding is not an accident. So the research I do is about how the meat and dairy industry has responded to knowledge and action about climate change, and I study archival industry documents, media reports, and lobbying records by the cattleman industry specifically. Since at least 1989, the U.S. beef industry has been aware of the outsized impacts that the beef industry has on climate change and global warming. And they knew that changing diets were one of the most readily available things that an individual or consumers could do to address climate change. However, the meat industry, we've documented this very thoroughly, has worked to confuse the public and downplay its role in climate change. Do I have to leave? Okay, I'll wrap up quickly. For the past 32 years, the meat companies have tried to make sure Americans did not know diets were part of climate action. Here are a couple of the things that they've said. We can certainly reduce our greenhouse gas production, but not by consuming less meat and milk. They've published ads in the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, that eliminating beef is not a realistic solution. Science shows otherwise, and fortunately, many cities are listening to the science instead of the industry, and I'm thrilled that Encinitas is considering doing the same. Please let me know how I can help. Thanks.
Excuse me, can I ask your last name again?
Jacquet. Jacquet. Jacquet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Okay, we don't have any other oral communications.
That's correct. And just let the record show that Commissioner Wick walked in at 5:34 p.m., so he is present.
Okay, next we'll move on to our presentation by Skylar. I'm sorry if I mispronounce the last name, Engi? Oh yeah, Engi. Okay, welcome, Skylar. Oh, okay. Welcome, Skylar, Larissa, and Jessica. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm the executive director. Can we put the slides up? Crystal, sweep at the wheel there. No? Nope.
Is that the right one?
Nope.
No, it's not the right one. Sorry. Okay, hold on. Technical.
That's it.
This one.
Yep. So I'm Jessica Toth. I'm the executive director of Solana Center for Environmental Innovation. Thank you so much for having us. There's actually Commissioner Parker, who invited us after, I think you were dropping off some electronic waste at Solana Center. We do a lot of different things right here in Encinitas. We're really at the forefront of addressing California's requirements for SB 1383. You may be familiar with that. I'll give you a little bit of overview of what that involves. But that's about keeping surplus food from entering the landfill. And what we do in all the work that we do is translating mandate into practice. So we're working with businesses to really make it practical. You'll notice in some of the things I'll talk about, food businesses are typically operating on low margins. And so I think the work that and I'm not here to make a pitch for us, but the work that we do in educating and consulting to businesses is really key in helping the legislation progress. Alone, most businesses are not prepared to fund what they consider environmental concerns. So we need to translate that into something that is meaningful to them. So we'll share some stories in our discussion here, some trends that Skylar's seeing with the data, and then you're really fortunate to have Larissa here, who is the key contact running the SB 1383 programming for the city of Encinitas. Next slide, please. So a little bit about SB 1383. I would assume that if you all are on the Environmental Commission, you probably know something about it. It's that California law to reduce greenhouse gases that are caused by landfilled organic waste. So by 2025, the state required that statewide all edible food, 20% of all edible food as compared to a 2018 baseline needed to be recovered. And recovered means that it goes to a food recovery agency. The all part is that the businesses have to donate 100% of all their edible food. But statewide, we're looking to move the needle by 20% as compared to that 2018 baseline. Since 2024, all regulated businesses need to partner with a food rescue agency, like I said, to recover all the surplus food. And at this time, jurisdictions can take enforcement action up to $10,000 a day, and actually jurisdictions can be fined up to $10,000 a day for noncompliance. Next slide. So Solana Center, what we're doing, we're working with the majority of the San Diego region. providing outreach and inspections with the main purpose of ensuring that donation programs are in place. So they have to show, according to the law, that they have a partnership agreement. So we're going into all of your businesses that are considered, and you can correct me, Larissa, I don't know if it's all of them, but we classified Tier 1 and Tier 2 food-generating businesses, and of those working with the city, identified which were the priority businesses to go into. We're also ensuring that there's no intentional spoilage. So intentional spoilage, I used to think, oh my goodness, the business are probably pouring bleach on, produce. Of course, that's not what's happening. Intentional spoilage, though, is, for example, this bakery, which I don't think it's an Encinitas bakery, but they had been throwing something like 1,200 pounds a day of food in the trash because it wasn't scored right, or it had too big a bubble, or the sizing wasn't quite right. Of course, it was completely edible. So this is not inedible food, it's got to be edible food. But the problem was they didn't want to spend the effort, their labor and their packaging to repackage for food that they weren't going to be able to sell. So we can talk a little bit more about that. So the other things that we're looking for is proper signage is in place, for identifying, and proper handling is in place, and we are addressing any problems that they're having in meeting the law. Next page. So I'm just talk about one particular case. I'm really proud of this. It's actually in San Marcos, not here in Encinitas. But prior to our first inspection, Hollandia Dairy was donating 2% of the potential. Most of that surplus was being hauled for animal feed, and it was very expensive for them, to the tune of, close to 300,000 pounds a year was going for animal feed or being dumped. And Leah, who is Larissa's counterpart, she's in that picture there, she was doing an inspection, and she said, well, what is that truckload of products there? And he said, well, it goes back for animal feed. Well, it turns out one of the most sought after items for food recovery at the food banks is dairy products. Only 10%, and it's only about 10% of what they're getting. So this was a real coup and they were very willing and enthusiastic to have their product actually go to people in need. And as I talked about earlier, they kind of need that sweetener, right? They're not going to do it purely out of the goodness of their heart if there's a cost to it. So they actually incurred significant cost savings because the food banks were now picking up from them instead of them hauling for animal feed. So it was like a 60x increase. Before we started working with them, they were donating about 5,000 pounds, it was 4,500 pounds a year. And now it's over 250,000 pounds a year that are going to people in need. As I mentioned, dairy products are highly nutritious and in demand. I have a quote from the food bank: milk is a high quality and nutritious food that's always in demand by our neighbors in need, and we're thrilled to be able to offer this product thanks to our partnership. So this is not an easy thing. So we needed to identify who would be the best partner for them. And then they had problems. That first partner that we identified, they weren't consistent in picking up. So you can imagine these guys are trying to move, hundreds of pounds a day of dairy products, and somebody doesn't show up. Oh, and they got to keep it refrigerated. So, there's always starts and stops, and that's very much what Larissa and the rest of her team do, is working with these businesses to find the right solution. Later, staff identified, because they were really moving product, they needed a second partner. So we helped them identify that. Another problem is that the crates aren't always being returned by the Food Recovery Agency. So I just bring these up to say that while it seems like, wow, rainbows and unicorns, it's all worked out. Of course it has to a great degree, and that's why I'm showcasing this situation, but it takes a lot of work. Next slide, please. And this is my last one before Skylar's going to come up and talk about some of the data that she's been looking at. We looked at the impact on the meals distributed. So there's a multiplier that you can use to take the pounds of donated food and translate that roughly into the number of meals. So just looking at one food bank, Feeding San Diego, this is not all the cities that we work with, but this was one slice of data. 4 different cities, 14 different distribution agencies. So we have 4 cities, one food bank. That food bank distributes out to food pantries. So like our CRC here in Encinitas, they receive food from Feeding San Diego and from the San Diego Food Bank. So those are the main food banks, and now they're distributing it out. During the time that we were working with these 4 cities and Feeding San Diego, from 2022, the number of meal equivalents increased by close to 50%. I'm not saying that that's about us. I'm not saying it's exclusively about the law, but you can see in combination that law that requires that businesses donate the maximum amount of edible food to the best of their ability, and then having somebody hold their hand is really important, and that's what we've been doing. Excuse me. So I will leave it at that. You're fortunate to have Skylar Engie here. She is a UCSD master's student, been doing some research using our data. She'll tell you some of the things she's learning.
Hi, so I'd love to give you guys a little overview about what my project is and why I ended up working with the Solana Center. So for part of my master's program, I have a capstone project, and I'm analyzing the different sectors and helping to reduce food waste to meet the USDA and the EPA's goal of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And so I'm specifically looking at the roles of nonprofit organizations, private sector, and then state government policies in helping to meet that goal. And so I've been working with the Solana Center to look at specifically SB 1383's edible food recovery component to see if we found success in that in California in reducing waste. And I'm also looking at the role of the Solana Center in education, awareness, and compliance and helping to reduce food waste to see what that role of the nonprofit sector is in helping to meet these state goals and the overarching EPA's goal. And so the data that we've been using to kind of see if this is successful is if food generator businesses have a program in place with a food recovery organization. And so the Solana Center has had interactions with 342 different businesses in San Diego County. And on their first interaction, 52% of them had a program in place with a food recovery organization. Of that 342 interactions, 126 have had multiple interactions with the Solana Center. So that means the Solana Center has come in and done like technical assistance or education and consulted. And so of those 126, 82% of those businesses that have had multiple interactions with the Solana Center have implemented a program in place by their final interaction. And so this has shown that there's been a 30% increase in the total number of businesses with a program in place through interactions with the Solana Center. And so the data is showing that the Solana Center's interactions with these businesses is really having a positive impact. And it's kind of leading my research into to show that like the role of the nonprofits is just crucial in helping to consult and help these businesses to reduce their food waste.
Alrighty, yes. So I'm Larissa Amaral. I'm the associate manager of the environmental solutions team. So I'm basically like the boots on the ground doing all these inspections. It was really cool to see our work in data format to really see that, wow, we're making an impact. So I do manage the Encinitas contract for SB 1383. So I just wanted to highlight some specific things that I've noticed right here in Encinitas. I do want to point out that Encinitas has been the most proactive in enforcement actions, which is really great. I've noticed that there's like a small window after an inspection is concluded where a business will actually take the actions that you require of them. So basically how it works is if a business fails, they're given a period we call a grace period before they get issued an NOV, which is what we call a notice of violation. So it's key that grace period isn't too long because actions get lost. They get forgotten by the business, and then you just kind of don't get really taken that seriously either. because if there's no actions being taken right after, they're like, why do I need to do this? So yeah, it's really important for them to take us seriously. So that corrective action really does need to happen in a timely manner, which Encinitas is really good at doing that. The majority of the businesses that we have failed, they have come into compliance in that grace period. There have been a few that have reached that NOV state, but really good news is that no business has even gotten to the next state, which is citation, where monetary fines. No business has gotten to that point. So that's really exciting news. That enforcement action really does drive change for these businesses to really take this seriously. A big barrier, and this is across multiple cities, but it's just a big barrier, so it definitely does impact Encinitas as well, is staff turnover in this industry. It's just really hard. I think it's very unlikely that you're going to be meeting with the same manager twice. Even if we do go and visit them multiple times within a year, the staff turnover is really hard. So that's a barrier because it's really hard to educate one manager, and then you give them all these recommendations, and you spend a lot of time with them, and then they leave, and then the next manager comes and you go and inspect them, and you have to start all over again because all those actions and that momentum completely gets lost. So really hard to educate. And then also back to that enforcement note I was trying to make, staff turnover is a limitation as well, because if you have a long grace period after an inspection, that manager can change, and then it completely gets lost. And you're like, I don't even know who I'm supposed to talk to anymore. So yeah, very important to kind of get that timeline right. So we're currently really trying to figure out the best enforcement, and I really think Encinitas has it figured out. So next slide. Okay, some learnings. With SB 1383, Jess kind of pointed out to this, and with Skylar's data as well, is that without SB 1383 and without our intervention with these businesses, they really wouldn't be doing much to improve their program or even put a program in place. Ooh, I'm getting kind of close. Many of them don't know that SB 1383 exists. The larger corporations, yes, because they have multiple locations across the entire state, so they kind of push it down to the local level. But for like the smaller, family-owned, kind of the private sectors, they really don't know about it. They don't even know that they're regulated or what exactly they need to be doing. So I think we're really key in getting them educated in that. And then with that, it's really important for us when we go in there to really figure out what each business trigger is, or finding their why. Like, why should they be doing this outside of just it's a law? Because with that, you can get a more successful, sustainable program. So like Jess mentioned, Hollandia, their why was their hauling costs, right? It really reduced with this program. We went to a grocery store that was really utilizing the tax deductions for these donations. So that was a big motivator for them to, try and donate as much as possible instead of just discarding it. Let's see. But all in all, food waste reduction is essential. I tell every business, the goal isn't to be donating thousands upon thousands of pounds, because that just means that your business isn't profitable, or there's something in your processes that definitely need to be adjusted, right? So we definitely educate them on source reduction, and then using donations as kind of like that last option. If there was no way for them to repurpose the product, or, maybe there's so many options out there before donations, but if there's really nothing else to do, donating is way better than discarding it. And in the end, there's just too much food for food recovery organizations to recover. We're currently dealing with prepared foods. It's just more complex to donate to prepared foods, for health code reasons. It has to be in certain temp, it has to be in certain packaging. It's just more complicated than just donating a bag of bread, right? That can be just in your pantry. So we're dealing with that right now, and just finding FROs that are willing to take it and that have the right facilities to be able to take it, so that food can still be safe and distributed out. And then another big barrier that we're dealing with is corporate policies. We are doing inspections at the local level because we want to see exactly how it's rolling out at each individual store. But sometimes they say that they can't donate something because their corporate policy just says no. But that's really hard for us because, when you're dealing with a corporate policy that spans across multiple jurisdictions and even states, how do you move that? How do you get them to notice it and move that needle, right, towards, accepting this product that they originally thought couldn't be donated? So we brought this up to CalRecycle. It is a big issue, but they recommended multiple cities kind of come together and try and, get it to their attention that way. But it's just really slow process. So a lot of potential there. And then lastly, there's just a lot of food scraps to process and just way too much compost to be distributed. So back again to that source reduction is really key to all of this. Thank you.
I had a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to the enforcement, is it the city's code enforcement who issues violations and/or up to a $10,000 fine through the city's code enforcement, or do you
So
guys?
it depends. Some cities they want to go through code enforcement just because they already have a system in place and all of that. But some cities are doing it themselves, or I guess their own department. So it just really depends. It's written in their municipal code what their enforcement policy is. So we just follow that. But just note that the Solana Center does not do any of the enforcement actions. It's all through the city, so they are the ones that issue the NOVs, the citations, and all of that. What we call is just compliance verification. So if a business submits something to us, like we say, they're required to have records. And if they didn't have any records at the inspection, they'll submit their records to us. And then we look at them and we say, okay, we go to the city and say, these look good. You can let them know that they're a pass now. That's kind of our involvement with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question also, because you talked about multiple inspections. How often do you inspect a particular business?
Yeah, so the ordinance actually doesn't state any timeline. It doesn't say annually, quarterly, or anything. It just says enough to ensure compliance. So how I explain it to businesses is, if we go in there and they are just a mess, they don't have a program in place, they don't have a partner, no agreement, no nothing, we can visit them as much as we want. We can visit them once a month until they get it together if they really need it.
Is that what you're doing?
Not to that extent. That's a lot of visits. We're confined with, what's the word I want, funding to be able to do that. But everything takes time. And then on the flip side, there are businesses that are in pretty good shape. We may want to visit them less times. And then there's the businesses that are regulated that really don't have much potential for donation. We call them watch list businesses. They're your small, like mom and pop, like wholesalers. For them, we just kind of call them and say, hey, has anything changed? Have you guys grown? Has anything in your process changed? So for them, we'll probably visit them like once a year, once every 2 years. It kind of all depends.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also have another question for Skylar. In terms of it's a similar issue of the interactions you talked about, multiple interactions with the different businesses. Like how many interactions and what was like the time frame of the multiple interactions?
Yeah, it was typically 2 to 3 interactions. In my data, I didn't find many more than 3, and they were spread out between, I think it was 2020 to 2025. So spread out over 3 years.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, and I also want to just say thank you very much. I thought this was very informative, and I was very happy you could come.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you also, and I'm sorry I didn't give you a proper introduction. Thank you to the Solana Center for all the great work that you do. Yeah, and you're really making a difference. I had a question about whether the kind of edible donation program is also, when you're working with businesses, also piggybacks onto like other zero waste efforts, like the education for like the organics composting, and is there kind of synergy there, just reducing waste overall?
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely do, but we, try and not step on EDCO's toes too much. That's basically their jurisdiction. But we do find that EDCO is more worried about, right-sizing their bins and making sure that they have their organic waste option. And and that waste stream is running smoothly. When we're there at the business and doing the inspections, we're in the business, we're right inside. So we're making sure that, they're sorting properly, they have proper signage, how is staff training going? So that's kind of our role in that. So I guess we're helping as much as we can.
Great. Okay, one last question. Sorry if we're taking up too much time here. Are there any additional actions that the city can do to kind of improve the recovery of?
Oh man, that's like a dream question. Like, what else could you
Pie
guys
in the
be
sky
doing?
question.
I know.
Think big here.
I don't know. Can you think of anything off the top? What else the city could be doing?
I think education, should I come to
Yeah,
the mic?
go ahead.
I think education and outreach is really key. So the more that we can do up front, in the very beginning, and Larissa, I think to some extent I've heard the stories of early on, they didn't know, I think Larissa said, they didn't know, what is 1383? So it's helped a lot that we've gotten the word out there. I think I hear among my neighbors now that they have a sense that food waste causes greenhouse gas when it ends up in the landfill. That's very different than before the legislation. So I think as much education and outreach as we can do is important. It looks like the Cal Recycle funding may not continue, which has funded much of this programming. And so all the cities will pivot to handling things somewhat differently. So it'll be the responsibility of the city to figure out how to fund. And so the reality is that things like education outreach will probably fall more by the wayside. Maybe we've gotten to the point where businesses and consumers are now all, for the most part, knowledgeable, and there's enough of a groundswell. I won't go there right now, but definitely we're further along that continuum. But I would guess that most cities, not speaking specifically about Encinitas, but will, with the lower funding, will let go of things like education and outreach, and will only do the mandated parts, follow through the mandated parts. And what we really want is clean waste streams, the commercial composting facilities, the anaerobic digester. When they get contaminated material, and sometimes they end up having to trash it. And then there's stories also of farmers putting compost out on their lands, and there's a plastic fork sticking in the soil. So you can just imagine all the downstream impacts of not doing the education outreach. That's a long-winded answer, but you did ask also the question about other things that we do when we're out there. The city of Encinitas has segmented the work, so another area that we've worked in the past, but we're not right now, is looking at what kinds of serviceware, compostable, recyclable serviceware, and that is not part of our programming. It would be a natural fit, but there's a different organization that's doing that. So there are opportunities to make things a little bit more efficient.
One last thing, have you looked into working with the city and when a business is getting their business license to introduce them to the 13?
Some cities are definitely doing that up front. I would assume Encinitas is. Do you know?
Yeah, so
I'm sure Crystal knows as well.
we actually just started discussing that with Paul Mackler. I'm sure you guys know who Paul is. We're working on putting that into the business license because it just makes sense, right? A lot of these thresholds for a business to be regulated is based off of like square footage. So that's not going to change regardless of, who the tenant is in that space. So if it's a change in ownership, it definitely makes sense to be in that, the business registration.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Yeah, great work. Okay, just because we have a packed meeting, I'm just going to move along to approval of minutes. Crystal. Oh, no, sorry, that's for us. Would anyone like to put forth a motion to approve last month's minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Great.
I can second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Looks like we have no informational items. And then next we have action item, the draft updated climate action plan.
All right, thank you.
Chair Kramer, Katie Kramer. So I have with me tonight Ryan Lamkin. He's our sustainability analyst at the city, and he will be giving the presentation tonight on our draft climate action plan for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Crystal, and good evening, Chair Kramer and commissioners. I'm really excited to present tonight the draft climate action plan update. So the contents of the presentation tonight will include a background on the climate action plan, the emissions inventory, projections, and proposed targets for the CAP update, the emissions reduction measures to achieve said targets, climate vulnerability and adaptation in Encinitas, implementing and monitoring the climate action plan, the California Environmental Quality Act considerations, and next steps for the CAP update. So to give a bit of background, let's start with what is a climate action plan. So a CAP is a comprehensive roadmap for addressing climate change through goals and measures that aim to reduce community-wide greenhouse gas emissions while supporting the city's broader sustainability goals. The key part of this slide to take away is that community-wide greenhouse gas emissions. And so our climate action plan is not just encompassing the City of Encinitas as an organization's emissions. Rather, it's all of the activity that generates emissions that takes place within the city is encompassed and accounted for in the climate action plan. And so why update the climate action plan? The main driver for the CAP update has been the 2018 climate action plan committing to an update within 5 years. Additionally, by updating our climate action plan several years after implementing, this allows us to take a step back and look at what has worked and the successes in implementing and some of the areas where we can improve. Additionally, there's some legislative drivers for the CAP update. Not included on here is AB 32, and so this bill was essentially in place for the 2018 CAP, and that drove our planning then, setting a 2020 target and 2050 emissions reductions target. But there's been new state legislation since 2018. And so SB 32 details a 40% reduction in relative to the 1990 emissions levels by 2030. And then AB 1279 is the statewide carbon neutrality goal for California by 2045. I don't know if I said that. And then our CAP update seeks to align with CARB's 2022 scoping plan, which kind of discusses how we'll actually achieve carbon neutrality and the other goals. And then these executive orders were kind of the drivers for developing the state legislation, SB 32 and AB 1279. And so as a result of the need to implement the climate action plan, city staff released a request for proposals and selected Ascent Environmental Incorporated and the Energy Policy Initiatives Center, EPIC, at the University of San Diego as the project consultants. And so it was initiated in 2023, and in 2024, the proposed emission reduction targets were selected. Throughout 2024, staff and the project consultant worked to develop the emissions reduction measures, and now we're in phase 4 of the CAP update process where the public draft is available, and we are beginning to draft the CEQA document. And it's notable that throughout the CAP update process, city staff and the project consultant have sought public and stakeholder input. And so that included attending the Environmental Commission with the draft measures. I believe that was in August 2024. City staff also conducted an online survey for the CAP update. We held several stakeholder interviews with community-based organizations. There were multiple public comment periods throughout the CAP update, and 3 public workshops will be held, and the final third workshop, final as of now, is planned for April 8th. And so with all of the development and engagement over the last year, we have our draft available. Yay, here's our beautiful cover for the CAP update. And so it details the following chapters with an executive summary, an introduction, Chapter 2's greenhouse gas emissions inventory, emissions and targets, and this details the selected baseline, and I'll get into what that means, the projected emissions target or projected emissions in Encinitas, and then the proposed targets for the CAP update. 3 is greenhouse gas reduction strategies, goals, and actions. This is really the meat of the CAP, as I like to call it. This is where all of the ways that we're actually going to achieve said targets are outlined. Chapter 4 goes over climate adaptation in Encinitas and our vulnerabilities. And then Chapter 5 discusses how we'll actually implement the plan. And Chapter 6 is references and then all of the attached appendices. And so the first portion of my slide really covered a lot of the contents that were in Chapter 1. And so now we'll move into Chapter 2, which is the emissions inventory, projections, and targets. And so the 2025 CAP, we utilize 2016 as our baseline. So this is a change from the 2018 CAP where we utilized 2012 as the baseline year. And so in 2016, Encinitas saw 381,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent approximately. And so those came from the following sectors with, you could see the largest sector being on-road transportation, which is all vehicle transportation throughout Encinitas. And then accounting for more than a third of emissions was the emissions associated with buildings. So that's electricity and natural gas emissions. And then solid waste deals with emissions that come from methane, like we heard from the presentation earlier. Off-road transportation sector is really everything outside of all that's on here. So that includes emissions from landscaping equipment, construction equipment, golf carts, really anything else that uses fossil fuels in the city. And then water and wastewater deal with emissions that come from the electricity and energy generated to pump water to the treatment plants and from water stations. And so this is the emissions forecast for the city. And so at the top of this graph here, above the blue line there where it starts to go up, that is detailing our what's called business as usual scenario. So this is if nothing was done to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So there are actions being taken, and so that's our legislatively adjusted emissions scenario, and so that's with federal and state emissions reductions. And so in the blue, that accounts for the state's fuel efficiency standards, and then California's fuel efficiency standards. And then the red section is California and San Diego Community Power's renewable electricity portfolio and goals. And so you'll see that the gray section of this graph is the remaining emissions that the city of Encinitas would have to fill to close emissions. And so the green dot on this slide, the existing CAP target, is just that. Our current target, the 2018 CAP set a target in 2020 and 2030. And so for the CAP update, we're setting a further out target to 2045. And our targets are a 40%, to be 40% below the 2016 baseline by 2030, and to be 85% below the 2016 baseline by 2045. And both of these targets are consistent with SB 32 and AB 1279. And so now that we've gone over our targets, let's talk about how we're actually going to achieve those those targets. So the CAP identifies 7 high-level emissions reduction strategies, and they're very closely aligned with the emission sectors that are identified in the emissions inventory. And so those include strategy 1, building decarbonization. This was formerly building efficiency in the 2018 CAP, and this includes strategies to see a citywide reduction in natural gas consumption in buildings. Renewable energy seeks to see electricity generated from renewable zero-emission sources. Water efficiency would reduce water consumption throughout the city. Clean and efficient transportation would seek to see low carbon and a more sustainable transportation sector. Number 5 is zero emission equipment, and this was formerly off-road equipment in the 2018 CAP, and this deals with landscaping equipment in Encinitas and mitigating the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. 6 is zero waste, which would enhance our recycling and organics recycling initiatives. And 7 is carbon sequestration, and that really deals with tree planting and taking carbon out of the atmosphere with trees. And so under each of these strategies are measures, and they have more specific actions identified with each measure. And so I wanted to take a moment to go over, when you're reading in chapter 3, there's these are how the tables are going to look that outline the different measures. So you can see there's the table number with the strategy number and title, and then you go down to the purple line there. That's where you'll find the CAP measure, the number of the CAP measure, and the title. Just below that, you could see a description of what that CAP measure is intended to do. And then our primary implementation action section, that identifies actually how we are going to implement and fully realize that measure. We've also included in the 2025 CAP as an update equity considerations for, I believe, all of the measures to state how, the CAP would intend to distribute access to, all of these options in an equitable manner. There's the performance metrics for 2030 and 2045. And then the greenhouse gas reduction potential associated with each of the measures. I wanted to note on this slide, you'll see throughout the CAP, there might be a reduction potential that says not quantified. This is for a number of reasons. And when I go over the measures, we could talk about why some of them aren't quantified. And then also new in the CAP update is a discussion on the lead department for implementing that measure, and then the departments and divisions that would support implementation. And so now I will try to swiftly go over the 32 measures that we have. So I will try to breeze through some of the existing ones, and if we have questions and clarifications, we can go over those after. But starting with the building decarbonization strategy, we have BD1, which would require residential remodels to do energy efficiency upgrades with their remodel. BD2 would require new residential development to be all electric to the extent which we can legally, which is through our high performance energy efficiency ordinance. BD 3 and 4 mirror BD 1 and 2, but on the non-residential side. And then a new measure in the building decarbonization strategy is BD 5, which is to decarbonize existing buildings. The majority of our emissions with natural gas and in our projections are coming from the existing buildings. So being able to take the natural gas where we can out of these buildings is really important. So the way the city would do that is through a set of studies, policies, incentive programs, and regulations to see really a citywide reduction in natural gas consumption. MBD1 is expanded upon from the 2018 cap. And so formerly this discussed doing energy efficiency upgrades at municipal facilities. We've expanded that to decarbonizing municipal facilities. MBD2 is a new measure, and this would require all any new municipal facilities that are developed in the future to be, at the time of construction, be made all electric. This is not quantified because we don't know, but future buildings there will be that the city is going to be building, so the consultant couldn't put a quantification to that. So moving on to renewable energy. So RE1 would seek to maintain and our membership in San Diego Community Power and see the same levels of participation that we do currently. This is another important reduction potential to note. You'll see by 2045 it is 0. That's because the state's laws and goals related to renewable energy end up superseding, in a way, San Diego Community Power, and so we can't claim emissions reductions for those anymore. They're included in the red part of that graph from earlier. And then RE2 would require existing non-residential buildings to install solar PV systems based on their certain triggers with their permit. MRE1 is expanded upon from the 2018 cap, so we would seek to install solar at municipal facilities, and it expanded to state that we would include battery storage with those solar systems as well. MRE2 is similar to MBD2, where new municipal facilities would, at the time of construction, be installed with on-site solar and battery storage. And moving on to water efficiency, so we would seek to support our local water districts' conservation efforts and their policies and regulations and everything they're doing to reduce water consumption. WE2 is a new measure. However, this is something that the city has had on the books since, I believe, 2015. And so this would require new single-family homes to be pre-plumbed for gray water systems. MWE1 is a new measure as well. So this would convert city-owned landscape in parks and within the public right-of-way to drought-tolerant or native species. And so we'd seek to see, I believe it's 5% of landscape converted to drought-tolerant and native by 2030 and 15% by 2045. And moving on to clean and efficient transportation. This is the longest strategy, as it is the largest emission sector for the city. And so starting with CET1, this would implement our active transportation plan to encourage people to bike and walk by installing better and more sidewalks and bike lanes throughout the city. CET2 is implementing a flexible fleet program. This is a fancy way of saying implementing a local shuttle system. And so this is actually in the 2018 cap. And we've just changed the terminology from local shuttle to flexible fleet to closer align with Sandag's terminology for such a system or program now. And so CET3 would require transportation demand management programs for new non-residential, residential, and major redevelopment projects. So this is basically a fancy way of saying that new developments, if they have a high potential to impact vehicle miles traveled, and there's going to be a lot of trips going to and from these developments, they would have to try to mitigate those trips by having a transportation demand management program, which is, it could come in a number of ways. It could be incentivizing their employees or their tenants, their customers, to commute alternatively to the development. It could be having bike racks. It could be various different ways to implement such a program. CET4 is to reduce vehicle miles traveled and see a citywide reduction in VMT by 2045. So this would be implemented through a numerous set of studies, regulations, and policies, such as the VMT exchange program, which staff is currently exploring. CET5 is to improve traffic flow, and this would be done with retiming traffic lights and installing roundabouts throughout the city. CET 6 and CET 7 would require residential and non-residential developments to install EV charging stations as applicable. MCET1, still on transportation, would transition the city's municipal fleet to be a zero-emission municipal fleet where feasible with our light-duty fleet. And then MCET2 would implement a municipal employee transportation demand management program. So this is essentially stating that we would incentivize city employees to commute alternatively. And then MCET3 would install public EV charging stations at city-owned sites and facilities as identified in our EV charging station master plan. Zero-emission equipment, formerly off-road equipment. So ZE1, that's interesting to say, used to saying OR1, would seek to limit the use of gas-powered leaf blowers. This is existing, something we're already doing. We're expanding that to ZE2, which is limiting the use of all gas-powered landscape equipment by, and this wouldn't begin until 2030. Zero waste. We don't have any new measures here, but we would, there's a suite of implementation actions related to implementing SB 1383 and other waste and recycling initiatives. Now moving on to carbon sequestration. So throughout our year of public and stakeholder input, this is really where we heard a lot of input. And so we have 4 new measures here, and hopefully we've captured some of the feedback that we've heard. And so starting with CS1, this would establish a tree canopy goal for the city. And so this would essentially involve conducting a LiDAR study to see the city's current tree canopy coverage percentage. And then we would set a target to increase that percentage. And this is assuming we would successfully implement and meet that target. And so to come up with the reduction potential here, we used an older LiDAR study and assumed a 5% increase in the percentage that was identified in that study. CS2 is similar to the gray water measure, where it's says new here, but something we've been doing for a while, and that's to enforce landscape tree requirements at new developments. CS3 would incentivize tree planting on private property, so that would be done with a free tree giveaway program for residents and potentially business owners. CS4 would adopt and implement the mature tree ordinance, which is currently very close to being adopted, I believe. But because we don't know the specifics of it quite yet, it's not quantified for the cap. MCS1 is to continue to plant and maintain city-owned trees throughout the city. Okay, we made it. So 7 strategies, 32 measures, 31 supporting measures, and the supporting measures can't be quantified. You see with the graph on the left that if we successfully implemented all of those measures, and if their greenhouse gas reduction potentials are fully realized, that we will be achieving the 40% below the 2016 baseline target and the 2045 target. And so now we're going to go over the climate vulnerability and adaptation, and this is really the why we are doing this and have our climate action plan and need to implement these goals. And so for the CAP update, we utilized the climate vulnerability assessment and adaptation framework for the safety element update. This was just conducted in 2023, so we felt it was, some of the most recently available data, and that we wanted to be closely aligned with the safety element, as a lot of the actions here deal directly with safety through the lens of climate adaptation. And so you could see here, these are the climate impacts that Encinitas will feel throughout this century as carbon emissions continue. And in the chapter, you could see there's several different projections with like a a high level emission scenario and a middle of the road emission scenario to come up with these increases and or decreases in some of these different events. So as you know, Encinitas is already being impacted, and while we are taking many actions to adapt to the impacts of climate change, such as the Army Corps of Engineers project that was completed last year, there's still more that needs to be done, and the CAP is reaffirming the adaptive actions which were identified in that climate vulnerability and adaptation framework as a part of the safety element as the actions that we should be taking. And so now that we've gone over this great plan, if maybe I could say so myself, we'll talk about how we'll actually implement and achieve the plan. So there are several key components to implementing the CAP, and that starts with administration and staffing. So the Sustainability Division within the Development Services Department is responsible for administering the Climate Action Plan and monitoring its implementation. We kind of touched on this earlier, but the Sustainability Division on our own can't implement the Climate Action Plan, and so that requires all city departments working to implement the CAP. And so our team will continuously work to make sure that the CAP is top of mind for other city staff, especially in the budgeting processes each year. And so on budgeting as well, the Climate Action Plan update is in the process of completing a implementation cost analysis to determine how much it'll be to actually implement all of the measures. And public participation is, of course, extremely important. As we know, the CAP is a community-wide climate action plan, so we, as the city of Encinitas, can't solely implement it. We need the help from our community members, and social equity is like another key component of that, and ensuring all of our community is brought along with us in climate action. And I wanted to provide some considerations to the Commission for the California Environmental Quality Act. So the 2018 CAP adopted a negative declaration stating that the impacts to the environment of the Climate Action Plan were less than significant. And so we are doing an addendum to that same negative declaration for the 2025 Climate Action Plan. And one of the benefits to having a CEQA qualified CAP is that projects that demonstrate Climate Action Plan consistency, if they are all electric and of the other measures that we have, they are implementing in their project, and then they can streamline their project's greenhouse gas analysis. And so now I'll go over the next steps for the CAP update. So like I said, the implementation cost analysis we're expecting to be complete around April. And then the final public comment period began on March 11th and will go all the way through till April 11th. The final workshop is planned for April 8th. Throughout March and April, we are seeking input from all of the city commissions, starting here with the Environmental Commission. And then the draft is tentatively going to be considered by City Council on April 16th. And then staff will compile all of the comments and the recommendations that we've received over the last couple months, and bring back the draft to Environmental Commission, seeking recommendation for council adoption. And tentatively on May 28th, the final CAP would be adopted by City Council in addition to the negative declaration addendum. So thank you for sticking with me through that long presentation, and I am happy to answer questions.
Wow, that was very well done. Congratulations to Crystal and Ryan and anybody else who put the effort into that document. It's amazing.
Real quick, sorry, we do have a speaker.
Oh.
Okay. Okay.
I only had a couple quick questions. One is on the transportation. It was brought up at a previous meeting. The reduction between 5 and 15 mile an hour speed limits in the city, was that able to be captured to reduce greenhouse gases? Is it a measurable amount that would bring it down?
So that action specifically was not evaluated as a measure option. So I guess the short answer is no. But if that was something that you thought would be of interest, I don't know specifically how much savings we would get from going down. That'd definitely be a consultant question, but something we could look into if you'd like.
Only if it helps the bottom line?
Yeah, I guess my short answer is unfortunately I don't know. Okay. So if you wanted to put it in your action tonight to ask the consultant to evaluate that as a measure option, we could certainly do that.
All right, and then the last thing I had was on ZW1. And I'm sure you know exactly what that is without going to it. It was about garden tools and how leaf blowers are already not supposed to be used, but it's going to include everything else. Is that an ordinance that's pending or needs to go through this commission at some point to be written and brought forward, or is there another means that it's going to be done?
Yeah, so for ZE2, that program wouldn't begin until 2030, and so that's also how we did the greenhouse gas reduction calculation. And so that would be brought to Environmental Commission for consideration several years down the road for consideration. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it would be in similar fashion as the leaf blower, where there was an ordinance adopted that made it codified into our municipal code what types of equipment are allowed and not allowed. So that would be the process.
Would it be better to bring it in sooner than, even though 2030 is the target date?
It would be, but there's a lot of measures to implement, as you could see from the list. So we tried to space it out so that we can effectively utilize staff resources. And so some measures are going sooner and some are going later. And this was just one of them that we put a few years out.
Right. Give us a wink when it's time.
Will do.
I have a lot of questions. First of all, thank you so much. I think you did a great job. I really appreciate the tables where you identify what you're planning on doing, the date, and then the greenhouse gas reduction equivalents. I think that really helps in terms of thinking about things, and so I like that a lot. One of them was on page 3.7, 3-7. And it said something about 1,250,000 square feet of new commercial construction. Do you guys know something about? I mean, I thought that was a whole lot of square footage, and I was just wondering if you knew if there's something in the works, or if it was just where would that be?
Yeah, so I believe this calculation came from at the beginning of the CAP update process. Our consultant did a sort of data request from us, and that included pulling historical permit data. And so I believe they found from that was about the average. I think it's 250,000 square feet per year of new commercial space would be going into Encinitas, and they got that number again from the permits that we pulled over the years and that data.
Okay. And then there were a couple of things that were really optimistic. And so it seems like we're going to need a whole lot of education or outreach, or the 50% retrofitting of existing buildings for that's really optimistic. And it does have a lot of savings in terms of greenhouse gas equivalents. And the other one was the getting 1,400 new commuters to switch to non-polluting sources of transportation. That's a lot of people, isn't it? I mean, that's by 2030, and then it was 7,500 by 2045.
It could be a lot, but it's something that we did evaluate it as staff and is this a possibility? Can we develop a program that can convince those commuters to convert? So, we do think that it's a possibility. You're right. These are some ambitious targets, but if we have the resources to be able to do that outreach, provide those incentive programs, we do want to try to aim high and achieve those actual reductions.
So I have a couple more. One, I briefly told you, Crystal, that it was on page 3-23. It is a 2014 LiDAR study for the tree canopy. It was the 22% tree coverage. And when I was on the UFAC, there was a 2018 study that was done by DUDEC. I mean, it was done by the U.S. Forest Service, but it was calculated by DUDEC to have only 15% coverage. So that I would please ask them. And then the other thing that is changed that I've seen in UFAC is that they are changing the number of trees in the parking lot requirement. UFAC is just an advisory committee, so I'm not, when it was first done, they were advising the planning committee. I'm not 100% sure if that's still the hierarchy. So to see where that change has come in, but it's definitely not one tree for 5 spaces anymore.
So, okay, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the requirement is different than 1 tree per 5 spaces, and you want us to clarify that?
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, because I know that the UFAC voted on it at the end of last year.
Okay.
So it must have been October of last year.
Okay.
And so, but I don't know where it is.
Got it.
in
Yeah,
the-
I can
the
double check on
downstream.
that. I don't think that it's made its way to actual code requirement yet that I'm aware of, but we can certainly double check on that and make sure we've got the right information in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it may change by May when you're putting it out. And I really do applaud you guys for talking about private trees. I think that's the only way that we're really going to get the tree canopy coverage. And I think it's completely doable. And I really am glad that you are talking about that, because I think UFAC has not been wanting to talk about that. So I think I love it that you guys are talking about that. On the other hand, the 1,900 trees in 5 years is a lot of trees for the city. And so I think, maybe bumping up the private trees and maybe lowering a little bit on the city trees might be something. But again, both of those need a lot of education and outreach. But and then I have one more thing, and this is, it's politically, it's not really a political question, but I'm just trying to find out how you guys work within the city. Because politically, with the new city council, there's been a couple of members that have really downplayed bike lanes versus, road usage. And I just want to know, and I don't know if you'll be able to tell me this, how safe is the work that you're doing for the CAP goal for bike lanes?
I think your point is well made. It would be up to council's decision when the climate action plan goes to them for consideration and adoption. So at that time, they would have an opportunity to, see and review the full document just like you are. And if the active transportation plan is not something that they want to emphasize or utilize in the climate action plan, then they can certainly provide staff with direction to make a modification to that part of the plan. So yeah, you're right, it's ultimately up to the current council what form or shape the climate action plan ends up being in. So this is, the form it's in now is staff's recommendation based on the information that we've gathered from our consultants that were hired and what we heard from the public and the previous information we had to go on. So, and then it will be up to council to decide how they want to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question kind of on the administration part of it. So the 32 measures, they're all going to have some level of cost associated with them, and then you're going to have some budget. So everyone's going to want to get them all done at once, but there's going to have to be some prioritization, I'm assuming, or something. What is that process going to be? Is there some kind of decision gate or metrics that you're looking at, like bang for your buck or easy to do or all the above? How's that going to be decided?
Yeah, so that's part of the reason why we're doing the implementation cost analysis to try to balance just that. So it's difficult to look at the full, up to the year 2045, but we're taking just a crack at the first 5 years to see how we can balance out the cost. You're right, there's a cost associated with many of these measures. And then ultimately, so that would be a plan that would be developed that could be a guideline for council to utilize and staff to utilize to implement the plan. And then it would be up to the current council, whoever the current council is during that year, to actually allocate that budget for that future fiscal year to implement that particular measure, whether it be a program, a CIP project, working on an ordinance, that sort of thing.
Okay, so they're going to be different teams working on each of the 32 measures, and then like whoever gets theirs ready to present, they present it to the council, and if the council approves it.
Yeah, and then the sustainability division would facilitate that effort. So we would make sure that each of the departments is aware of, okay, this was the plan for you to have your project go in year 3, so please put it in your budget request to council that you need to implement this program next year and you need X amount of money to do so. And this is all in alignment with the city's climate action plan, and that's where your request is coming from.
Yeah. Is there any opportunity for us to participate in some of these measures to actually implement them?
Yeah, we could certainly add some of them to your work plan and you guys could help out. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd also like to commend you and city staff for this gold standard of a climate action plan and amazing summary, Ryan. You managed to make that engaging and entertaining. It's just such a colossal amount of work, and it's really exciting to see all that's being done. I just wanted to kind of get a few comments and maybe recommendations on the record for some additional kind of considerations that we might be able to also include in the CAP. I know it was mentioned that there wasn't a consumption-based approach taken, that's kind of harder to quantify, I guess, like the consumption of greenhouse gas producing goods within the city, but that is a huge piece of the puzzle that is missing. And kind of one example that seems like low-hanging fruit is the meat consumption, as Dr. Jacquet kind of started talking about earlier. And a lot of other cities around the world have included in their climate action plans or equivalents in other countries the reduction of meat products, like at city events, in schools, public hospitals, things like that. And I would like to see that considered in our CAP. It's a pretty easy thing to do. I know that the school district is already doing, I think they have meatless Mondays, some Mondays, and more plant-based options, but maybe just something to kind of consider and maybe expand upon. And along that line, it seemed like there was a kind of chance for a synergy. There was a kind of a line in the CAP that said, considering the impact of purchasing is important, and it mentioned the environmentally preferable purchasing policy, which I know we have a subcommittee thinking about that. And so if there are any ways that that subcommittee can kind of brainstorm and think about, more lower emission products, whether they're local or plant-based or whatever, that we could help out with the implementation phase in that way. And I know that you're going to get a lot of this during the workshops, but with the tree planting, for it to actually have some carbon reduction or carbon sequestration effect, we actually need to make sure that the tree lives, right, long enough to sequester the carbon, that the life cycle of actually like purchasing the tree and planting the tree and all the fertilizer you give to the tree, like doesn't end up producing more carbon than it sequesters. So just like to see kind of those considerations taken into account too. Also harmonizing that with the native plant policy, focusing on native trees. I think those are the main things. And again, just great job, guys.
I have just one more point of clarification. I think you mentioned it, Ryan, and that was in the power with the community power bringing in renewable energy at about 100% with the opting in the city. If there is a big push for solar on residential and commercial, and that happens, there is no adjustment because we're already bringing in 100% renewable. So if the whole city, every house put solar on it, it wouldn't impact the greenhouse gas emissions because we're already getting it in a renewable source.
Yeah, and I believe when you get solar, you are interconnected to the grid, and so a part of that interconnection, community power also pulls from, and so I don't believe it would affect the calculation at all, Crystal.
Yeah, they are factored into one another because you're right. It is they do offset each other, so they wouldn't be. I guess the solar wouldn't be counted twice per se. You know, that kind of thing. I can tell what you're getting at, and the cap is calculated in that way. So.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'll try and be easy. Is there, this is our fourth revision or whatnot. Is there anything you're like particularly excited about, or you're like, oh, we've learned so much in like this 2025, we're going to be doing X or Y? Like, is there something that jumps out at you?
I would say that I'm excited about the reach code measures that we have, and I believe there's 6 or 8 of the measures are reach codes, so they deal with the building code and working to reduce emissions that way, and so that's something that we're gonna be able to implement right away. We do our reach code development and amendments with the statewide code cycles, and that is 2025. So that's exciting that would get to be done right away.
Yeah, and I'll just share that this, of the many other iterations of our climate action plan, this one is the one that is the most ambitious. As Carol pointed out, there are a couple of measures in here that are very lofty, I would say. I think they're still doable, but they would be aggressive measures that we would have to really be tackling with some substantial city effort. So that's exciting, but also daunting. That'd be a lot more work. So.
I mean, I don't think it was a coincidence that the point and the line exactly met up. You were like, reached it, okay. Right? But that would be exciting to make it happen. We need to try our best, right?
Okay, last but not least, on the reach code, the code that we passed just last year, where did that fit in? I don't know if I saw that.
Yeah, that ties into BD2. So the way the measure reads is require new residential development decarbonization. And I kind of phrase it to the extent that we can, because as you know, with the Berkeley ruling, and we can't require all electric buildings. So the high performance ordinance does work to require, in a way, new residential decarbonization. And so it's also important to note, since we're here, I'll mention it, since we can't require it, and some developments, even though we have that high performance ordinance, are still going to be able to have mixed fuel development. This calculation assumes that 75% of new development would be all electric.
So the measure says readopt. I guess that's what confused me.
Oh, yeah. So the reason for that is that we are on a 3-year building code cycle. So every 3 years, the state adopts a new building code, and then all the local cities have to readopt our local code, readopt the state code as part of our local code. Yeah. And so that means that every 3 years, we also have to readopt our reach codes to keep them consistent and keep them within the code. So that's why it says readopt.
Got it. On that note, then my next question for, I guess, BD5, like what is the outlook for the future code this year? Because I feel like I've heard like heat pumps being a requirement or like all electric appliances becoming a requirement, but I'm not totally sure like if that's actually what we're expecting and how that would, or if that was included in here.
Yeah, so this this measure wouldn't include the changes to this statewide code for new development because it's existing buildings, and I don't believe it's not available yet, so we don't necessarily know the specifics of the 2025 state code, but I don't believe there's anything in there explaining that, you know, certain additions or alterations, which would be existing buildings, have to do heat pump instead of air conditioners. So that wasn't accounted for in here.
So that would only be new construction. That's what the talks in the new code are then?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And that applies to, well, it also includes additions and alterations, but not like this, and that would kind of get factored into BD1 because it's existing residential development. And so since BD5 really deals with existing buildings that aren't going through the permitting process, we can't capture what's going on with like the state's code.
Okay, I see. And then, like, out of curiosity, what have other cities done to address that? Because I think San Diego has a similar goal, but I've never fully understood like how they intend to act on that.
You mean in reference to BD5?
Yeah.
Like what are the specifics?
I mean, I know the implementation actions are like exploring and studies and things like that, but do we have a sense of like what would actually happen there?
Yeah. So one example, one concrete example of something that we could look at doing is having oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the building. No, I'm blanking on the terminology. So it's basically when you have a threshold of a building where you require them to report what their energy usage is. And then, so that's actually, that would be for existing buildings of a certain size. And then once, so first you start with requiring them to report on what their energy use is, and that just gets them to their brain thinking on like, oh, wow, I'm using a lot of energy. Maybe I could, you know, be more efficient. And then you can kind of ratchet up, and then as years go on, you can say, okay, well now in this year, you know, say in year 5 of this requirement, we're not only going to have you report, we're going to have you show a certain percentage of energy reduction in your usage. And so there are ways we can kind of require energy efficiency measures of existing buildings. And some of the ways they can do that, one of the easiest ways is to decarbonize, is to convert existing gas uses to electric appliance uses. So that's one example, but there's other things we could do like incentive programs, rebate programs, education programs, studies, collaboration with agency partners to, team up on some of these things. So yeah, it's not a fully realized measure, but we do think that there's going to be some opportunity in the future to kind of come up with some things that could realize the performance metrics that we've identified.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's no silver bullet for that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
no, there is not. This will definitely be one of the more challenging measures to implement. Yeah.
I had a few transportation questions too. The first being how an EV impacts vehicle miles traveled. Like, are those still counted?
They are in the legislatively adjusted BAU, so they're in the blue portion because
Okay.
it's the state has its advanced clean car 1 and 2 rules around EVs. Those go into the state's emission reductions, not us, as the city.
Okay, I guess I'm just thinking like our goal is to get to 3.8 miles. If I have an EV, I'm still driving my car, right? This is kind of what I was getting
Oh,
at.
yeah, for VMT.
Yeah.
So, sorry, what's the question specifically?
Like,
You
does
repeat it.
driving in EV count towards VMT?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. So, yeah, that's a good question. So that's why we have separate electric vehicle measures as well, because VMT, the focus is to reduce the actual miles traveled, whether it's an electric vehicle or not. But we do take into account that the type of vehicles that are going to be driving in the VMT measure are slowly over the years going to be more and more electric vehicles. So that is considered in the calculation.
Okay, got it. And then, sorry if I missed this, Ryan. Could you elaborate on the exchange program? I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, that's something our mobility planner is currently working on right now, and it's kind of modeled. The city of Escondido has a similar VMT exchange program, and it's still at the early stages, but essentially it would be requiring developers to mitigate VMT by building a portion or funding a portion of a part of our active transportation plan. So they'd have to fund or build like a part of a bike lane near their project. And so,
Okay.
yeah, that's still being
see.
developed. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Couple more here. On the charging side of things, we have a goal of 15 fast chargers. I think we already have 11. Is our goal only to build 4 more?
Yeah, I think so. There's 2 parts to that. So there's the CET. Sorry, Crystal. Can you go back?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
CET7 is the non-residential. So they're on private spaces, and so I need to remind myself. And then MCET3 is like the publicly owned fast chargers, and so they're kind of separate. So we have 11 right now, but there might be like 6, I think, that are at city sites, and then the rest are going to be at privately owned sites. So does that kind of help to answer your question?
Which
Yeah.
measure were you specifically referring to?
I think this is. Oh, I guess it's MCET3. You're right. So it's 15 at municipal sites then. I
Yeah,
see. Okay.
yeah, and then there's another performance metric for CET7 for those like private commercial sites.
Oh, okay. I missed
Yeah.
that. So we have a goal also for public sites of fast charging. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're 2 separate goals.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess your initial question was, we've already got 11 fast charging sites. So we've got of the ones that let's see.
Like, are these city ones here, I assume? So
Yeah,
there's-
so these are ones, for MCET3, these are charging stations that the city would install at city-owned parking lots. So we have the 6 that are down below, the
Yeah.
DC fast chargers. So yeah, it would be adding, what is that, 9 more?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I see.
by
Yeah.
2030.
I guess what I was getting at was like, is that ambitious enough if we already
Got
had
it.
11, but 9
Yeah.
is better, of course, but, yeah, I guess I don't understand like the goal on the public side then, but, or if there is one.
On the public side, you mean like commercial development installing EV charging
Yeah,
stations?
yeah.
Yeah, so on that side, that would be where you would look to CET7, where the non-residential. So that's where certain developments that are non-residential would trigger a requirement to install EV charging stations. And so with that one, let's see, yeah, so that one we didn't measure in actual charging stations, but number of permits approved.
Okay.
So each of those permits could have anywhere from 1 to 5 charging stations, and they could be DC fast or they could be level 2. It just depends on the development. So it was harder to quantify that particular measure in actual charging stations.
Yeah.
The easier metric for us was to count the permit numbers, if that makes sense. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's a little bit apples to oranges, but just the way that the measure is set up, we have to also make sure that we can effectively monitor our implementation, and so that was the best way that we could figure to make sure that we're meeting the requirement without knowing, exactly what the projects are going to look like that we're permitting.
Yeah, okay. Okay, this will be my last question. Is there anything, and hopefully I didn't miss this either, but on adding charging to existing developments?
Yeah, well, I guess that would be the MCET 3 goal. So it's not as specifically quantified, but we do say in the measure, the description is that, and we encourage non-residential property owners to install electric vehicle charging stations in accordance with the EV charging station master plan. So
Okay.
the city is committing to installing a certain number within within our municipal property, and then additionally, we would be implementing programs to encourage those property owners that you're referencing to also install charging stations voluntarily on their properties as well, to try to up the number of charging stations.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll also add that we have a requirement in our green building code that certain tenant improvements or additions, alterations to non-residential spaces would have to install EV charging stations. So that's kind of also would push the needle on existing development to install EV chargers.
And that's how those new ones just got built, basically, right? Those
Which ones?
up kind of by Solana Center.
Oh, yeah, on El Camino.
Yeah.
I forget the cross street, but yes, there are some new ones along El Camino, and those were a requirement of a permit approval. Yeah.
So it worked, yeah.
It worked. It worked.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, thanks so much, Ryan and Crystal. And Maria has let me know that we have a comment from the public on this agenda item.
These things. I'm Russell Levan, and first of all, thank you. I've been working on issues, environmental issues in this town for 20 plus years, and this is the most comprehensive report we've seen, and so kudos for that. I do have a question, and of course, it was on my phone and it just went away. Let's see if it shows back up. On table 3.5, you were talking about the strategy for water efficiency, and I guess this goes for a number of these. Some of these goals that are for 2030 and 2045 are fantastic. The bummer is that there's like 1,000 houses that are going to be built that are in the hopper today. So I don't know if there's some of these we can convince some of the builders, as you were just describing, whether they're putting in charging stations or, we're looking at gray water on that particular issue. By 2030, 180 new homes pre-plumbed for gray water. And boy, if we could really encourage them today, not in 2030 or 2045, that'd be great. I did notice that was the main issue that was described in that, and I have not read through this in its entirety in any way, but it didn't mention stormwater capture and reuse, and especially efficiency and reduction. And Carol knows this. I came to the council a year and a half or two ago, looking at our water meters are incredibly antiquated. And as a matter of fact, yesterday, the water department came by my house to read the meter manually because they can't afford to replace the batteries in the water meter, so they have to read it manually. And my comment to the council a year and a half ago was there's products available so that you can monitor your water use to the minute, and it's real time. So it means something to the customers, where if you have a leak, it will notify you that you have a leak. Instead of a month and a half later when you get your bill and you go, oh my God, I had a huge leak and I had no idea. And the comment back was that we would be putting in new electronic meters, but they have never mentioned when. And I think it will be millions of dollars and years before we get to that. So that might be something to put into a water efficiency use where these meters are available for $100. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we are moving on to, oh, actually, do we need to put forth a motion then to?
Yeah, if there are specific things that you want changed, I know there was a lot of discussion, but if there are specific things that you want to recommend get changed in the document, then the vote would be your opportunity to request certain amendments to the draft cap.
Would that includes additions, not just change, like?
Yeah,
an addition would be
additions,
changed.
removals, modifications, anything.
Okay, I guess we need to take a tally. I need to write things down.
Can it be a running commentary?
Yeah, maybe we could just start with Carol. Do you have
Oh,
any?
I was
additions?
just wondering if how useful would it be, are notes versus a vote?
A vote would be preferred because then it's on the record that your vote included these specific changes. So,
Okay.
I mean, I know a lot of what you asked were clarifications, but maybe if each of you could identify the things that you would actually recommend be changed, other than just a clarification or a correction, but maybe the bigger things. And then, yeah, I know it's a lot, but that would be the best way to have it be on the record.
Do we want to do this for next month? Put our recommendations for changes next month?
If you waited till
Isn't it
next month.
I'm sorry, isn't it open for public comment now anyway? We can put all our comments in online to the
It is,
website?
yeah. So if you had this, the smaller type comments, or if you wanted to, yeah, I mean, certainly I will, be re-reviewing this recording and kind of taking note of what you said. But another fantastic way is to send an email through the public comment period process to document some of the things that you identified. If there are, I would recommend if there are specific things, though, that you all agree on, that I would include them in a vote tonight.
Okay. I mean, I would like to include the purchasing considerations, like lower carbon, purchasing of lower carbon emission items, and then including the native plant policy and the tree planting efforts. Those are the two things.
I would like to include your suggestion of the alternatives to meat in city events.
Okay, cool.
Um,
And anything else, Carol?
You said it best. What was your suggestion?
Well, it was just to consider kind of like lower carbon purchasing options at like city events and public organizations, institutions, so like schools, city events, including, lower meat, less meat options and more plant-based options at city events and at schools. I don't think we have any public hospitals here, but,
Would
Well,
that
I'll
fit-
just a point of clarification, we can't regulate the schools, but we could certainly regulate city events.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
sure.
Do we have a subcommittee on purchasing? Would that be a place to
do.
direct this to help move it along?
Purchasing policy? Yeah, that could be, there is a subcommittee, and yeah, they're actively working on their recommendations for modifications to the purchasing policy. So So yeah, if it was specific to city events or city purchasing, then that's where it could be folded in.
Perfect, yeah. All city purchasing would be great. Anything else? What do you guys think about the native, like, kind of highlighting preferential planting of natives?
No.
When-
I disagree myself, actually.
Yeah, there was that one presentation where they, or I forget, was it here or somewhere where they were mentioning that there was, an argument for not doing that.
I think that the Encinitas for Natives group is going to have at this at the workshop, so I can let it go for now. They're all about it, if we don't agree on that.
And if I may, I'll just add that we did kind of filter the installation of natives as part of the carbon sequestration measure. So it's in some of the supporting measures and such. So.
I probably just missed that. I like how you included maintain now, not just the planting of the trees, but the maintaining of the trees because they have to live, so that was good.
And then I would like you to look for the newer calculation for the tree coverage from the UFAC
Yeah.
that Dudek did.
So it sounds like there's two
Yeah.
formal requests in your vote right now. So it's the consider lower carbon purchasing options for city events. And then maybe we could say it as verify that the most current LiDAR study is being utilized for the climate action plan.
And city events and just city purchasing in general, I guess.
Yeah,
Would be great.
and city purchasing.
Well, I'm so sorry to extend this conversation because I know we have so much left. One thing I didn't see was a no idling kind of policy. Would that been considered? Like, just not for like the fleet, the city fleet, but just in general.
I think that's part of the traffic movement of when they were talking about using instead of having lights, that they're using traffic circles. I think that's a part of that.
Okay, there's just a lot of parking, cars idling and stuff.
I mean, I would say not necessarily. I think you make a good point about not having, and we don't have a no idling policy. It would apply to things like construction trucks and delivery vehicles and things like that. So definitely something to consider.
Is that okay to include? I mean, we can vote on this at the end and decide. Anyone opposed to that? You're gonna add that one in?
We had looked into idling a year or so ago, and if I remember right, the city is going all electric, and then most vehicles, newer ones anyway, have a function where they shut off at the red light and then start up when you demand to go. So the industry is sort of starting to make that obsolete, although there still are plenty of old cars out on the street too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'll put forth a motion to add 3 additional items for consideration to the cap. The, lower
Want me to repeat
carbon.
them back? I wrote notes.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
wonderful.
So the 3 that I heard were consider lower carbon purchasing options for city events and city purchasing, verify most current LiDAR study is being used, and consider a no idling policy be added as a measure.
Yeah, okay.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, great, thank you so much. Okay, can we move on to the work plan?
A quick point of order, the meeting's scheduled to go until 7:30. Can you make a motion to extend the meeting?
Yeah, okay, I'll make a motion to extend the meeting. Anyone want to second that?
To what time?
Oh, do I get to choose the time? Should we, just to be safe, say 8:30 or 8?
Your choice.
I'm just seeing everything we have. I
Can
guess
it
we could
be
make another motion.
re-upped if you did a 30-minute and then we ran over, we could
Do it
do a motion
again?
again to another?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it to 8 then, just not to scare anyone. Anyone want to second that?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you, Maria. Okay, and on to the work plan now.
Okay, so next is item 8B, which is your regular work plan update check-in. So I'll try to go pretty quickly through this. So for your first project, which is commission outreach and representation, just a note that there's a few upcoming events. So Arbor Day is on Saturday, April 5th at the Cardiff Sports Park from 9 to noon. Cyclovia will be on Sunday, May 18th from 10 to 2 along the Coast Highway between D and I Street. And EcoFest will be on June 1st at Encinitas Community Park. I think the time on that one is to be determined. Environmental awards. The awards will be presented to the winners on April 23rd at the City Council meeting. And then under the Native Policy Project, the update here is that SWCA, which is the consultant for the project, and city staff are hosting a public workshop for the Native Plant Ordinance on March 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. at City Hall in the Poinsettia Room. The purpose of this public workshop is to discuss the goals of the NPO and receive feedback on the draft outline of the ordinance, which will include compiling existing native plant lists. The draft NPO outline will be available prior to the meeting for review on the project's website. The workshop is open to the public, and we encourage your participation and input. And then staff recommends that following the Native Plant Ordinance webpage for updates. Regarding the next project, the Mobility Element update, the Mobility Element is tentatively scheduled to go before City Council on April 9th to receive feedback on the draft document. And then the 5-year cap update, you just heard a whole lot about that one, so I'll skip that. And then the Green Building Incentive Program, staff revisions are ready. We just need to find time to reconvene the subcommittee and then assess when we might be able to go to council to hear the item. And then under project number 10, which is the food service plastic ordinance, the survey results will be presented by the subcommittee tonight. I think it's the very next item we'll be hearing. And then related to Bee City USA, city staff is in the process of completing the first Bee City annual report, and we'll be doing some outreach about Bee City at Arbor Day as well. And then the last project I'll share with you is project number 12, which is the environmentally preferable purchasing and contracting policy. So the subcommittee met to discuss the suggested revisions of the policy on January 9th, and then they also met again on March 6th to further refine their suggestions and are planning to initiate the development of a proposed council recommendation. And that's all I've got. If you guys have any additional updates, please feel free to chime in.
We do also have a speaker on this item.
Okay, yes, welcome. Thanks.
I'll give you guys a break. I'm short. Okay, Molly Hintlian, District 2. I want to applaud your efforts, by the way. Awesome. And I appreciate what you're doing as a group. I'm a big fan of the Solana Center, and that's how I learned about the induction cooktop program. And I've been a part of the Green Building Incentive emails trying to do my little part. I live in an old building. I attended the electrification fair. That's a tough one to say. And I want to speak to the need and advocate for incentive and rebates. And I believe you guys are working on it, perhaps. At least Ryan said you're trying to. I think it's important to make incremental steps for homeowners, and it's expensive. So get a lot of new building, a lot of renovation going around, a lot of ADUs. It's easy to have them make the green incentives, but there's no incentives for an induction stove. And, you know, incremental steps are important. There's a lot of rebates for solar and car charging. So I would like to advocate that the commission and the sustainability group to continue to find ways. I'm sure there's creative ways to lump around, but every time I look around, and I've been looking into this for over a year, and there's no rebates. I did learn of a really cool product out there. It's called Copper Home, and it's a battery-operated induction stove, but it comes at a price. It's $6,000. Yeah, but it's really slick, and it's with a startup company out of Berkeley, so perhaps they want to incentivize Encinitas. Couple other things. I wanted to jump around that. It's too bad. I wanted to applaud the efforts of the Solana Center. I agree with them that education is at the forefront of need for evangelizing and letting people know how to recycle better, because believe it or not, people aren't good at it. And I know that the Solana Center can't speak to the EDCO green bin, but I feel there's only like 5 people in my whole neighborhood that really are doing it properly. And I go to the Solana Center and I collect the compost bags and I help distribute them, because I feel like that helps educate and remind people how to properly compost their food waste. So I'm out of time. But one more thing about the native plant workshop. I think that is awesome, and I think we need more of that workshop and hands-on stuff. So the more public outreach is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I would make a motion to approve the work plan.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and now we're reviewing the commission calendar.
So I can make this quick. We are here in March, and we'll be appointing the chair and vice chair tonight as well. And in April, the environmental award recipients will be announced at council on April 23rd. And we won't need to establish a subcommittee for the work plan because you've got a 2-year work plan. And then Arbor Day will be on April 5th. So I'll just stop there just the next couple months, just keep things short.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Okay, now I guess we'll move on to selecting a chairperson and vice chairperson.
I'd like to nominate the current chair, Commissioner Kramer, to a second term as chair.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Connor, for your vote of confidence. That was very nice of you. I'm happy to serve as chair for another year, but, also if anybody wants to, have an opportunity, happy to pass along the torch too, so we can have a discussion.
And I'm the same as the current vice chair if somebody
Yeah.
wanted to do that.
Yeah. And Mark.
But I would accept it again too if nobody wants to.
You guys are doing great. Keep it up.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Mark as the vice chair. They've been doing really good. I'm tapped out on bandwidth a little bit, but that's my nomination.
So I move that we have Commissioner Kramer as chair and Commissioner O'Connor as vice chair.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. Okay, now we have another item to discuss tonight. After months of really not having anything in our meetings, now we're just stacked it all in one meeting. So thanks for your patience. But okay, so here we go. Just to refresh you, this is in relation to our proposed amendment to City Code 1127, which right now just bans styrofoam, the sale and use of styrofoam in the city, and plastic straws. And we proposed to the commission last July, a strengthening of this ordinance to include single-use plastic foodware items like utensils, plates, cups, lids, stirrers, things like that. And so we got feedback from the commission that we needed to so that got approved by the full commission, but we got feedback that we needed to do some outreach to businesses. So this is just a really quick summary of the survey that we put out to food service providers. Next slide, Crystal. I don't know, Mark, if you want to do a little intro in the beginning?
No, I think we were all present last year when we discussed it, the simple things like human health, environmental health, plastics and the chemicals associated with them are harming all of us. So switching to compostable products was one of the reasons why. It's also can be associated into the cap and reductions of greenhouse gases. And anyway, I think we're all pretty aware of why we're trying to do this. So we'll just go right into the survey.
Thank you. Okay, we can go on to the next slide, Crystal. This is just real quickly, just to update you. There was a really cool opportunity to tie this proposed amendment to a new state law that's going to start being enforced January 1st, 2026, the Better Composting Standards Act, which basically strengthens the labeling requirements for compostable. So anything that has the compostable label in California by 2026 will truly be compostable, will have to be something that is allowable under the Organic Standards Act, the USDA or Agricultural Organic Standards Act. So it will be no bioplastics, no additives. It will just be truly biodegradable. So this would simplify matters greatly in that a food service provider would know, okay, I could just buy anything that has a compostable label on it, and it will be acceptable. It will be compostable in our anaerobic digester because we'll not have any bioplastics in it. The consumer will know this is truly compostable. I can put it in the green bin. I mean, this is, kind of like a idealized situation, but it really simplifies things. Right now, there's a lot of stuff out there that says it's compostable and it's not compostable. It's not recyclable or compostable, and it's just really contaminating our waste stream, and it's going into landfills. Yeah, go ahead.
I forgot that I took a picture in Austin, Texas. So these straws were really nice straws, commercially compostable only.
Yeah, that's not. Nope, there's a lot of confusion there. That would
It's
not.
a really nice straw. It
Yeah.
survived for like.
And then
1
Carol,
and 2
you
days.
just sent us was that you that sent the paper straws or lined with, did you send us that? Yeah, the forever chemicals. So yeah, we just got to get all this stuff out. It's got to be just like truly fiber-based or reusable. Reusable is the most preferred option.
Organic.
If you can't reuse, then yeah. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, please, Crystal. So just kind of the concept, and this was going off of dozens of other cities that have passed similar ordinances. We're kind of like surprisingly behind the curve on this a little bit for California. For dine-in providers, only reusable foodware would be allowed, except for paper napkins and trays and foil and compostable straws. Takeout, the idea was if this was to be an ordinance, or this amendment was to be passed in the city before 2026, before that strict labeling standard for compostable items. Before that, only natural fiber-based compostable materials will be allowed that are certified by BPI. That's kind of the standard right now, which is the best case that we have right now, but it still does allow some bioplastics in there, like plastic-lined fiber things. But we could do that before 2026. Then after 2026, it would have to have the compostable label. And then retail, so like anywhere, any place that sells kind of like food that's eaten on site, like Lazy Acres Deli, for example, or something, they would have the same rules as for takeout providers. And then food providers would also have to be allowed to, they would have to allow customers to bring their own reusable containers. And then plastic lids might have to be an exception for now, because there's just not really a very great, right now, alternative. But that is changing really quickly as demand for these things increases as more cities pass laws like this. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is the next phase. So I already talked about this. We got the recommendation from Commissioner Wick to do some outreach, so we did it. We did a Google Forms survey in collaboration with the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce, the Mainstream 101 organizations, city staff. We distributed the online survey to all registered food providers within Encinitas, and I'm sorry, I had a number on one of those. I think it was like 160 businesses or something like that on the list that Crystal provided. And I'll just go over the survey now. So this is the intro. And we can go on to the next slide. And so we asked the following questions. We got 11 responses. And that was after the chamber blasted this out, all the 101 organizations blasted it out, and then we sent it out ourselves. But we didn't offer an incentive, so I think this is a pretty good response, right, considering. So we asked about seating capacity, and so the majority of responses were 26 to 50 seats. Next slide, please. Primary dining experience, the majority was dine-in. So we got a lot of reusables in this survey because there was a lot of dine-in restaurants. Next slide, please. This I thought was interesting. Do you have a mechanized dishwashing or three-sink system? Because Mark, he's really good at doing the outreach and talking with different restaurant owners, and he got feedback that we can't have reusables. We don't have the dishwashing service, or we don't have a dishwasher. We don't have the sinks to do it. And it was, well, of all 11, they had the capability there. So I thought that was interesting. Next slide, please. So then we asked, if you do use reusables, what do you believe are the most important benefits? And waste reduction was the number one benefit. And they could answer more than one of these. So check all that apply. So they said cost savings, like a third of them, yes. Waste reduction, the majority said yes. Better food presentation, majority said yes. Environmental benefits, majority said yes. Customer satisfaction, about half said yes. Next slide, please. If you're not currently using reusables, what are your reasons? And this was just a long form answer, but one business said we don't have the capacity to store, wash, or serve reusables. We don't have enough square footage. It would be change the business model and how we serve our guests, the type of service they're expecting. We mostly do orders that are taken to go, so that makes sense if you can't do reusables. We're a grocery store, so we did get a grocery store, so that was kind of cool. The rest were restaurants. A few didn't answer what business they were. We allowed this to be anonymous if they wanted to be anonymous. But we did get a grocery store, so that was cool. So if you're not currently using reusables, what would help you make the switch? 6 out of 11 said, well, we are using reusables, so that was cool. And then, one said a grant or rebate for dishwashing equipment, another said grant or rebate for purchasing dishes. Nobody wanted technical assistance. Nobody wanted an ordinance requiring the change. And then we had this other, which unfortunately I couldn't figure out on Google Forms how to have multiple choice and then long form be one of them. I'm sure that was an option, but I couldn't figure that out. Okay, next slide, please. And then for takeout, delivery, or leftovers, what kind of containers do you use? Only 4 out of 11 used plastic, which was cool. 9 out of 11 paper or fiber-based products. Probably a majority of those are lined with plastic, and they may not know, I'm guessing, just based on what's out there. Compostable, in quotation marks, plastic, aluminum, and glass. One respondent had glass. Next, please. Sorry, this is really small and I can't read it because I don't have a screen in front of me, but I'll thank you. So if you use primarily non-plastic single-use items, what are the benefits and challenges? Okay, so these are compostable bioplastic items. What are the benefits and challenges? They don't hold heat. Someone said they don't hold heat well. Someone said they do hold heat well. Cost is a barrier. Another respondent said there's no benefits and challenges. Okay. There was a comment on the straws that are kind of inferior quality, and it might lead to people using more straws than if it was plastic. Someone said the main challenge with non-plastic single-use items are quality. Another business said it's not hard, we already do it. And the cost was higher, but consumer satisfaction is high. Okay, next slide, please. And then what types of assistance? We asked them kind of like, what would you need? What would you like to help you make this switch? And a purchasing co-op was really popular. So 7 out of 11. And just with kind of talking with the chamber and the 101s, we got kind of that feedback too. Creation of a purchasing co-op for reusables and the compostable items were both kind of viewed favorably. And then, thank you. Oh, and then the majority of businesses also wanted a list of acceptable compostable items. Providing startup funds was viewed, pretty favorably. And then another interesting answer was green bids in public spaces. That would be a kind of a key component of this. Next slide. So we also said there's organizations that can offer to help with making the switch to reusables. Would you be interested? And the majority said yes. Next slide, please. There are businesses that can provide reusable to-go cups and containers and like sanitize them and provide them for you. Would you like that? The majority said no on that one. Probably because of the cost associated. And then, I'm sorry, this is so tiny, but any additional comments? I highlighted there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 comments, but 2 out of the 5 were, are you, as a city, also going to install green bins in public spaces? Because if it's to go and the people take these compostable items out, where are they going to throw them away? If there's not a green bin, they're going to put them in, the landfill bin. And so just a side note, I had a meeting with the mayor a couple of weeks ago. He just met with all the chairs of the commissions, and we talked about this, and there was a discussion about maybe a pilot project for installing some green bins in public spaces, maybe along the 101 in Leucadia. And so that's something we can follow up on and discuss. And so there was kind of interest and support for that. And the businesses are saying it too. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, and sorry, we could go on. Next slide. I meant to take that out. So the takeaways: general support for the effort to move away from single-use plastic foodware items, with the exception of the grocery store and a national chain respondent. Those were the 2 respondents that were like, this is going to be harder for us. Addition of green bins was viewed as kind of an essential component. City assistance in the form of purchasing co-ops and guides for acceptable items would be welcome. And then one barrier to the transition from single-use plastics to compostable items is inferior quality, but this is expected to change really rapidly as more and more cities are passing these laws.
And what's the purchasing co-op? Like, I can picture it. REI is a co-op. I don't know.
Yeah, the thought was, and I don't have all the details, mapped out, but I heard that this does exist, where the city, I think, would actually somehow maybe either do the purchasing or facilitate the purchasing at a reduced rate. And so then the businesses can purchase items at a reduced rate.
Reducing cost by scale.
I think that's the idea, yeah.
I've looked in that too with other policy work around the county. And it's really actually difficult to do because then you have a space, you have people, you have to pay wages. The best alternative was like a Costco business center, where they do such bulk volumes already, they deliver to your store, that they are basically the co-op that is not just that single source. There's other businesses like them that will do the same function. They'll probably start competing against each other to even bring prices down, the Cisco's and all the other different ones. So it didn't appear that it was going to be a functional thing. Coronado was looking at it to have a space, pay employees. The companies that have these products will bring them to you for rock bottom prices. So it's not really a viable thing that I see being able to be done. I was going to say, again, fast foods was one of the biggest ones that was a negative, because they're drive-through, and all those products that they use to stick out the window, they also have a dine-in, they use those exact same products in the dine-in. So a lot of that was space. They don't have space for washers, and the one does have a washer, but they don't have space for all plates and cups and real forks and knives and stuff, was their argument. The turnout being somewhat low. In meetings, I Love Clean San Diego has a contract with the city to do outreach, and they're trying to just pick 5 restaurants of various types to go into for free and help them navigate these better products. They're pulling teeth trying to get people to want to engage with them. And in those meetings, everyone is very much in favor of giving the city a little bit of leverage by having an ordinance to make it a little bit more mandatory to where all these things can help put these measures in place.
You know, like we've talked about, incentives are always, you got to look at those. Like, I'm just thinking, as I read this, like, I wonder what city council would feel like is the best incentive for them to create an ordinance. Because, you know, they want to stay popular. And, you know, some of the feedback, right, is like customer satisfaction goes down. Not that this would kill our campaign, but
You're talking
maybe there's some just thought into like, how do we more market this towards like thinking about what their incentive would be?
Well, it goes along with their zero waste goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a big one. And also there's this groundswell of cities that are already doing this, like Oceanside, Carlsbad, Coronado. We're within San Diego County even. So
Yeah. I think did you guys end up talking to Carlsbad or somebody? Like, I wonder how did they get the city over the hump to make an
I
ordinance?
don't think it's as hard as you think it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, this is the way things are going.
Yeah.
Plastic, I mean, you probably saw that study about plastics in the brain. There's a teaspoonful of plastic in your brain.
Yeah.
Linked with Alzheimer's, and
did
it's just,
see that,
yeah. The
where did I see that?
plastic reduction efforts are, I think there's kind of just, we're reaching a critical tipping point where people are realizing like how pervasive and how dangerous plastics are. That's kind of the human health and environmental impact.
But see, I like that. I think, you know, just making sure you guys have like zero waste.
This presentation tonight was just to give you the survey
okay.
results. Yeah, we already
Okay.
gave you the full presentation
Okay.
and tried to sell you on the idea, and then you passed it through the commission. So
Yeah.
this is just the outreach part of it.
This year's for-profit award is going to a restaurant that is by far one of the greenest ones I've ever seen, using all the products. If we could carbon copy them, we would not have a problem. And this is at their own desire. Ocean-friendly restaurants through Surfrider, there's probably 8 or 10 restaurants in town that are already doing that. And some of the places you go and eat and you look, it's like, wow, they could win the award next year, or they could get certified by organizations that do that. I mean, it's really more popular than you think. And out of 11, the one person that didn't like stuff, we can't judge the whole 166 restaurants. The survey is a little wonky because of its lack of participation.
Chair Kramer, we do have a speaker on this item whenever you think it's appropriate.
Oh, okay, sure, let's do it. Thank you.
It's kind of helpful to hear your discussion, so
Yeah.
I can change my points. Russell Levan again, and it's kind of funny because I used to own the Recycled Products Purchasing Co-op, and we have discussed all of this. I'm also the president of the board at the Solana Center, and we created the list of acceptable compostable and recyclable items several years ago, which is now out of date. So I can't think of how many ways I'm involved in this. One of the comments that you made, which I think is worth addressing, is I just got back from Spain, and I was there for several weeks, and they have now put composting dumpsters basically in all public spaces. The ironic part of that is that I had my compostable material that I was going to go get rid of, and in the appropriate bin, and they're locked. And the city residents, most of them have passes for transportation, usually bus passes and train passes, and that pass has an electronic lock in it. And that's how you're able to open the compost bins, because they're concerned about contamination. And if they're just open, then people throw all their garbage in. And even though they are right next to each other. So it's going to take a time to implement this. And I think we've seen that just with the recycling bins and trash cans. If they're not literally physically touching each other, then people will, if they're next to a trash can, they throw all their stuff in a trash can. So the compost bin is going to have to be the same way. They're going to all have to be together, and it's going to have to be painfully obvious what is compostable and what isn't, because that, I think, is one of the biggest tragedies when they came out with all the compostable plastic, everything. Cutlery, the clamshells, is that all the businesses that were willing to participate got that material, and EDCO cannot process that. And to this day, numerous restaurants are still spending an enormous amount of money, way more than they would have if they'd bought a non-compostable plastic item, and it's still going to landfill. So I commend you on round 75 of getting rid of single-use items. I think that the other issue you mentioned was that restaurants don't have washing facilities, and the schools, they're building new kitchens without washers. So I think that that's something that if we're looking at new restaurants or new organizations, they should build in that, and they should be advised before they build something. I'd go on, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, any comments or questions from other commissioners? Oh, I'm not sure we're allowed to actually, yeah, sorry.
You can shout it out
Yeah,
and leave the room.
You know, if you want to leave a comment, you can email Maria. Okay, an announcement, yeah. Feel free to email Maria, and she will distribute it to the whole commission too, if you have any announcements. Sorry about that.
Well, I'm swayed. I'll make a motion to suggest that you guys bring this to council. Does anybody want to second that?
Yeah, is that wording okay,
I paused
Crystal,
that.
that we just?
I think we
Already
approved it to
approved
go.
the
It was
I've
just
already
a-
approved it to
Yeah.
take it to council,
Oh,
so,
we did.
I don't know if you necessarily need, you could,
Oh, I missed
I
that.
think it
Okay.
doesn't hurt to,
Reapprove it?
reapprove it based on the survey results that
go.
you saw, because you had asked for the survey to be done.
Back in July. We approved, oh, okay. We approved it, but then also said, let's do this outreach.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we can reapprove it.
Oh.
Maybe that's a double stamp of approval. This
Oh, if we don't have
amendment, this amended ordinance to require that single-use foodware be compostable or reusable. So only allow compostable or reusable foodware items.
Yeah.
Okay,
I didn't realize we had
it's
approved
good?
it back then. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so no
So Jen, just an
suggested-
acceptance and a thank you for the survey.
Yes, excellent work
Yeah,
for you guys
Okay.
putting all that together.
the lion's share,
Oh, thank
Commissioner
you.
Kramer.
Yeah. Okay, guess we're moving on, and now hopefully this makes it on the city council's agenda. Okay, so any updates on items of interest to commission?
Unfortunately, I have something. I have actually 2 slideshows, and I'm going to go really quick. I would hold this off, except for it is so relevant to what you guys have been talking about. So if Crystal could bring up the public green waste cans.
Real quick, can we make another motion to extend? Because it was
No,
only
I'm
extended
going
to
to
8.
finish by 8, for sure.
Okay.
There's
right.
others, though.
I can talk fast. I don't want to stay past 8.
Let's do it.
Just a second, sorry.
Announcement, BCK has canceled tomorrow's event at Oak Crest and postponed it until April 18th.
Okay, So public waste, organic waste cans, this is a real problem, and the city of Encinitas is not quite there. So this is Slovenia. I thought you'd like this. These are actually very locked. So, but I just have this thing, I take pictures of organic waste cans everywhere I go. This is Merida, Mexico. Mexico is really big on inorganic or organic and PET, which is the plastics. And this is in Chapultepec Park in Mexico City. Again, organics and inorganics. They've gotten rid of recycling. This is at the Getty Museum. And then this is at Fox Point Farms. And then this, this is either Solana Beach or Oceanside. I forgot which one, so sorry. Oh, that must be Solana Beach because that was Edco. And then this is Oceanside. And this is UC San Diego. This is Carlsbad Library. This is Encinitas. So Encinitas has it at the Paul Eckie Central Farmers Market. And they also have it inside in the main conference room in the community center. And then this, I think, is the easiest and the most, entry into compostables. This is at UCSD in the theaters. This was in the bathroom. So it's just all the paper towels are going straight in there, and they have another little trash can for trash. But, this could be done at the YMCA. It could be done a lot of places. And I think this would be a very easy way to start it, because like who was talking about just small incremental things to do. And as well as having something, in the city too, in the lobby. Okay. So then now I'm going with green waste cans in Encinitas restaurants. And so I looked, instead of having a survey, I did the survey, I just went around, and I started up at Roberto's, and I'm looking only at restaurants where people are meant to bus their own tables. So no full service. So Corner Pizza has the compost. So that's great. And Nectarine Grove is a super fantastic place in terms of having their compost, that you can put their compost away. Garanya also has the organic waste cans, and they have the little signs that tell you what you're supposed to do.
Ocean-friendly restaurant.
This is City Tacos. And City Tacos don't really have any signs, but at least they have it, so that's great. Bird Rock Coffee Roasters, they have their green waste can too. So, and McDonald's on Encinitas Boulevard does. So, yee-haw, not on Locadia. The Habit. So this, to me, this is a great example of clearly this was a two-hole trash that they changed. They just put they split one so that it's compost and recycling on one of them. And then Taco Bell. Woohoo! Who knew? They have, their paper is what they're doing is compostable. Chick-fil-A also, surprise, surprise, they went from styrofoam to now having compost. Chipotle also has it, and a lot of these are the more chain restaurants, and Mendocino Farms also is very good. And honorable mention, Lofty Coffee and Lazy Acres, they are so good, except they have, they put their plastic compostable food silver plasticware. And because they both use the expensive compostable plasticware. And then Starbucks and Kebab Shop, they have a 3-hole waste, but they don't have any green can, and especially, but Starbucks was crazy. Starbucks would be so easy because their coffee cups, their paper coffee cups are compostable. Okay, so, and then this is not complete, but I saw 44 restaurants without organic waste cans. So this really shows that we're really going to have to do both. You can't just have an ordinance that are making people have organic or compostable, serviceware without making sure that they have an organic waste can. So there is an ordinance about they supposed to have an organic waste can. So it's
Thank you, Carol. Okay, it's 1 minute till. So that was really informative. Thank you. Any future commissioner-initiated agenda items? All right. Awesome, everyone. Thank you. We'll adjourn.
All right.
Is the city promoting this at all? That's what I was going to say, is that there's the textile event, which wasn't on your list, and then Local Voices, which is on the 19th, which is next Wednesday, which... I know, I just don't know if these guys know about it. So that might be something, something Local Voices is Jess and